Latif moved into the apartment on a bright Monday afternoon, carrying one suitcase and a small plastic bag of food. The building wasn't beautiful, but it was quiet. And quiet was all he wanted. He unlocked his new door and pushed it open slowly. The room echoed with emptiness. No furniture. No voices. Just silence. He smiled. Silence meant peace. No landlord drama. No noisy neighbors. After arranging his mattress on the floor, he finally sat down to rest. Just as he closed his eyes, Latif opened his eyes immediately. He checked his phone. 2:17 p.m. Most people should be at work by now. So who just entered the next apartment? Latif stepped into the corridor quietly and closed his door behind him. The hallway was empty. Too empty. But the door opposite his had a fresh padlock. And scratches around the handle. Like someone kept trying to force it open. Latif frowned. Why lock a door from the outside? When someone just went in. A faint sound came from inside. Not footsteps. Not talking. It sounded like something dragging across the floor. His heart started beating faster. He leaned closer to listen. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Complete silence. Then, a whisper. Very soft. Very close. Latif. He froze. How did whoever was inside know his name? He had never spoken to anyone in this building. The whisper came again. Slower this time. Latif. Open the door. Latif stood frozen in the quiet corridor, staring at the neighbor's door as if it might suddenly move again. His fingers hovered near the cold metal handle, but fear locked his muscles in place. Even the air felt heavy, thick like smoke, pressing against his chest and making it hard to breathe. Something deep inside him whispered that opening that door would change everything forever. His heart pounded loudly inside his ears, each beat echoing through his skull like a drum. He swallowed hard and glanced behind him, half expecting another tenant to appear and laugh at his fear. But the hallway was empty, stretching long and silent, every door shut tight as though the entire building was holding its breath with him. Gathering what little courage he had left, Latif slowly leaned closer to the door and pressed his ear against it. The metal felt cold against his skin. For a moment, there was nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence so deep it felt unnatural, like the room beyond the door did not belong to the world of the living. Then he heard it again. A slow dragging sound, like heavy furniture being pulled across the floor. The noise scraped and paused, as if something inside was moving without legs. The sound crawled straight into his spine, sending chills through his entire body. Latif stepped back quickly, his slippers squeaking against the tiles. He shook his head, trying to convince himself it was just an old pipe or maybe rats inside the walls. But deep down, he knew this building didn't have rats. And pipes didn't whisper names. Before he could think clearly, a soft whisper slipped through the tiny space under the door. It was faint, almost carried by the wind, yet painfully clear. It sounded close, too close, like lips were right next to his ear even though the door was still shut tight. Latif. The voice breathed slowly, stretching his name like it had known him for years. His blood ran cold instantly. Nobody here knew his name. He had only moved into the apartment 3 days ago and barely spoke to anyone except the security guard downstairs. He felt his legs weaken slightly. Memories flashed through his mind, moving boxes, signing papers, the landlord smiling too much. Had someone been watching him since the first day? Had someone followed him here? The thought made his stomach twist painfully. The padlock hanging on the door suddenly began to rattle on its own. Not gently, but violently, as though invisible hands were shaking it in anger. The sharp metal clinks echoed through the hallway, bouncing off the walls and making the silence even more terrifying. Latif watched in disbelief as the padlock slipped free and dropped to the floor with a loud crash. The sound rang through the building like a gunshot. Slowly, very slowly, the door handle began to turn by itself, creaking as though something inside had finally decided to let him in. The door opened slowly with a long, painful creak, like it hadn't been touched in years. Latif felt a wave of cold air rush out and brush against his skin. It wasn't normal air. It felt heavy and lifeless, like the inside of a freezer. His arms immediately filled with goosebumps as he stared into the darkness beyond the doorway. He hesitated for a few seconds, then forced his feet to move forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the floor was pulling him back. His slippers scraped softly against the tiles, the tiny sound echoing loudly in the silence, making him painfully aware that he was completely alone. Inside, the apartment looked strangely empty. No sofa. No television. No curtains. Just bare walls and a dusty floor covered with faint footprints. It didn't look like someone lived there. It looked like a place someone had abandoned in a hurry, leaving nothing behind but silence. Latif stepped in carefully, his eyes scanning every corner. The air smelled old, like damp cement and rust. He covered his nose slightly with his hand as he moved deeper into the room. His heart kept warning him to leave, but his curiosity pushed him forward. Then he noticed something strange near the wall. A small wooden chair sat alone in the center of the room, facing the corner like someone had placed it there on purpose. The sight made his chest tighten. Why would an empty apartment have only one chair? He slowly walked toward the chair, his footsteps cautious and measured. The closer he got, the colder the air became. His breath started to show faintly like mist, even though it wasn't night or raining. It felt like the temperature inside this room didn't obey normal rules. Resting on the chair was something that made him stop instantly. A small notebook. Old and worn, with torn edges and a dusty cover. It looked like it had been there for years. But there were no cobwebs on it, as if someone had touched it recently. His hands trembled as he picked it up and flipped it open. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, names written over and over again. Dozens of them. Some crossed out. Some circled. He frowned, confused, until his eyes landed on the last page. Written boldly across the final page was his own name. Latif. Not once. Not twice. But hundreds of times, covering the entire sheet like someone had been practicing it obsessively. His throat went dry instantly as fear crawled slowly into his chest. Before he could react, the apartment door behind him slammed shut with a violent bang. The loud crash made him jump so hard the notebook fell from his hands. The lights flickered once. Twice. Then everything went dark, swallowing the room in thick black silence. Darkness swallowed the entire room instantly, thick and suffocating, like someone had thrown a heavy blanket over his eyes. Latif couldn't see his own hands anymore. His breathing became loud and uneven, echoing around him. For a terrifying second, he wondered if he had somehow gone blind. He fumbled for his phone inside his pocket with shaky fingers and quickly turned on the flashlight. A thin beam of white light cut through the darkness, revealing dust floating slowly in the air. The tiny particles looked almost alive, swirling like invisible spirits around him. "Calm down. It's nothing," he muttered to himself, though his voice cracked badly. The sound didn't comfort him. Instead, it bounced strangely off the walls, returning softer and distorted, like someone else had repeated his words right after him. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then the beam landed on the far wall, and Latif's heart nearly stopped. Scratched into the paint were dozens of tall marks, like prison tally counts. Someone had been counting days. Hundreds of days. Below the tall marks were names. Different names carved deeply into the wall. Some looked old and faded. Others looked fresh. His eyes moved slowly across them until he saw something that made his stomach twist violently. At the very bottom, freshly carved and still bright, was his own name again. Latif. The letters were uneven and desperate, as though whoever wrote them had been terrified. His hands began to shake uncontrollably as a cold realization crept into his mind. "How is this possible?" he whispered. He had never stepped inside this apartment before tonight. Yet his name was everywhere, the notebook, the walls, even the door. It felt like someone had known him long before he ever moved into this building. Then his phone buzzed suddenly in his hand. The vibration almost made him drop it. With trembling fingers, he looked down at the screen. It was a notification from the apartment management app he had installed when he moved in. The message read, "Welcome back, Tenant Latif. Unit 3B has been assigned to you again." His heart skipped painfully. Again. He stared at the word over and over. He had only moved here 3 days ago. Or at least, that's what he remembered. A sudden wave of memories crashed into his head, flashes of himself living here before, arguing with the landlord, begging to leave, scratching his own name on the wall. His knees weakened as the truth hit him. The neighbor he had been afraid of was never someone else, it had always been him.